You guys, my name is Kimani Woods, and I am the communications manager here at Timewise Financial. And we are super excited to host this family wealth planning webinar for you today. Caroline has put together a really great presentation just to talk to you guys and help lead you guys through the process of talking to your family members, your loved ones, or whoever it is that you are wanting to leave wealth to, going through the process of talking to them, the process of some planning tips, as well as some tax saving advice as well. So this is going to be a really, really great presentation. We are so looking forward to sharing it with you. And we just want to thank you all once again for joining us today. And you can go ahead and kick it off, Caroline.
All right, thanks, Kimani. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. As Kimani mentioned, my name's Caroline Piehl. I know many of you, but there's a handful that I have not met. I am one of the managing partners at Timewise, and I am physically located in Denver, but work with clients throughout the US. And today's topic is one that I often find that many people kind of put on the back burner. We'll get to it when we get to it, but it is very important. And so that is why we put together some materials for you guys, just some tips and key questions to consider around family wealth planning. So this is being recorded and we will be sending this webinar out. So as we go through the presentation, if you think of anyone that this could be helpful information for, we will send it out to you, and feel free to forward it on to anyone that you think could benefit from it. So starting off first, I want to talk about what generational wealth is. And I think this term is often, misconstrued as, only for people who have, multi-million dollar estates. But in reality, it's much more than just the money, right? Obviously, assets are a big component of that, and passing along those assets in a tax efficient way and making sure you have the right structure in place to pass those down. But it's also much more than just the money. It's also about the values and the financial habits that you want to pass on to the next generation or potentially two generations down. So it is both about the financial side of getting, the right structure in place and thinking about the tax implications. And we will be talking about that piece because that is a very important piece. In addition to that, we will also be talking about more of the soft side of making sure that you are also having those conversations to pass along both the values and the financial habits that we want, the next generation to also continue on with. So that being said, it's a pretty staggering fact that about 70% of wealthy families will lose their wealth by just the second generation. So it won't even make it past to the grandkids or to that third generation. And then 90% of that, of people will lose that inheritance by the third generation. So this is a pretty staggering statistic. There's a variety of reasons of why this stat is so high. It could be, not having the proper estate documents set up, not having a will, not having a trust. And it could also be attributed to just not having any conversations around money with your kids or your grandkids, and not instilling values or passing along any kind of education on what to do and how to make decisions around money. So it's a lot of different reasons, and we're going to cover, the top reasons of why this statistic is true and how to avoid becoming one of those statistics. And it is common. The reality is money. I know definitely for my parents, my grandparents, money was a taboo topic. It was something that people didn't talk about. Even just talking to even the younger generation, people talk about their salaries out in the open. People in their early 20s, their early working career, they're talking about how much they make. That was something we definitely didn't do just 10, 15 years ago. And I know for a fact it wasn't something that parents or grandparents were doing. And so that is changing. But current state for especially baby boomer generation is, not really wanting to talk about money because it can feel awkward. You might not want your kids to know how much you have because, it will make them feel entitled, or that they don't have to work as hard, or they don't want, your kids to talk about your parents' money with their friends. Maybe it's not talking to your spouse about money for a variety of reasons, or maybe it's kids not feeling like they can ask you questions about money because, you might not have been the example to have those conversations. And over two-thirds of affluent Americans have not talked to their kids about wealth, and they don't plan to. So that is pretty eye-opening to me, and that not only have they not had the conversation, but they don't plan to in their lifetime. So we want to make sure that you guys don't become one of these statistics, and giving you a couple of tools of how to have those different conversations. The reality is, whether you like it or not, typically the parent is supposed to play that role as kind of the CEO of the family. All of us have worked in organizations, whether they're large, big matrix organizations, or a small business, or running your own small business. And similar to a business, your family is a business unit. And so as the parent, as the grandparent, it really, that responsibility of having that money conversation and making sure that your estate is set up in the right way, it does fall on your shoulders. And so just kind of acknowledging that it's pretty much up to you as the parent, to start that conversation, and to bring up, facilitate that conversation with your kids, your grandkids, just to get the ball rolling. And so some of you might be sitting here saying, my family's different. We don't talk about money, because we don't feel that it's necessary. I don't think we need to have a trust set up or a will, because my kids, they're not going to fight about money. Like, our family's different. And I know every family is different, but we have seen a lot of different situations play out. And even the most tight-knit families face conflict when estates and documents are not properly set up, especially if it's a premature death. And so our job as financial advisors, as certified financial planners, is to point out the risks. And so that is what I'm going to do today. The risks, if you choose to kind of avoid getting your documents in order, avoid thinking about the tax implications, if you avoid having those money conversations with your kids, your grandkids, or even with your parents, these are the current risks on the table. And so I'm going to go through and talk about key strategies that we can put in play to try to mitigate these 4 different risks. Now, obviously, there's additional risk above and beyond these 4, but these are really the big ones. Number 1 is the risk of taxation. And without proper planning, more of your money while you're still living for your own retirement is going to go to Uncle Sam, and therefore less of it is going to be passed on to your heirs. In addition to that, if you don't have proper planning around your estate and having documents set up, more of your inheritance once you pass might be subject to going to Uncle Sam than actually passing through to your beneficiaries. So that's one, it's a big one. Number 2 is investment risk. Your estate can be dwindled away due to poor investment planning, poor decisions around investment strategies. So we want to talk about that. Number 3 is, unfortunately, we don't know when we're going to go. One of the biggest risks that we plan for is living too long. You might have 0 family DNA or any kind of history of parents living into their 90s, and then you might end up living until age 95. If we don't plan for living longer, then that's going to be an ugly surprise when we get to that point in time. And so that is a huge part of planning that we want to discuss. And then on the flip side, the risk of a premature death, which also comes with different complications and implications. And then lastly, a risk of poor habits and poor decision making when it comes to passing money on to your beneficiaries, and just lack of education, right? I think everyone starts with their understanding of money at different points, and it's a gradual experience to kind of learn a little bit over time. And so there is definitely a role that you can play in making sure we're avoiding that 4th risk. So I'm going to start with the financial strategies of a couple of things, just questions to ask to follow up with. Am I covered on this? Is there anything we need to do? So this is meant to be really just kind of an eye-opening thought starter. And then really the work comes in with working with your advisor to make sure that your plan is covered off on those four different risks. So we're going to start with everyone's favorite, taxes. And like I said, this is the risk of more of your money going to Uncle Sam. And as many of you know, we are a tax-led financial firm. And the reality is, every single thing we do every day has a tax implication. You know, when you're born, when you pass away, when you sell something, when you buy something, when you gift something, when you inherit something, every single thing has a tax implication. And so our goal is twofold. Number one is to reduce your lifetime tax burden while you're still living. Number one, just for your retirement, so that you keep more of your own money. And number two, so that you have a larger legacy to pass on, and less of that is going to the government. And then the second goal is actually upon passing with your estate, we want as much of your estate to go to your heirs, and make sure it's not subject to that estate tax. So we're going to talk through a couple strategies here, just to discuss. It's not a one size fits all. There might be certain strategies in here that are not applicable to you whatsoever. So keep that in mind. The first piece around reducing your lifetime tax burden, we talk a lot, and you probably hear in the investment world around diversifying your investments. Similar to that, we want to diversify your tax assets. A lot of clients, a lot of baby boomers, with pensions falling off, it became on you, the individual, to save for your retirement. And everyone was kind of funneling all their savings into a 401k, which is great. You're saving money. But what happens when you're retired? Your single asset that you have to live off of, in addition to Social Security, is a large 401k. Again, it's a good problem to have that you have the asset. Let's just say, for easy math, it's $1 million 401k that turns into an IRA. You don't actually have $1 million to live off of in retirement. You have anywhere from 600,000 to probably 750,000, because every dollar you take out of an IRA or a 401k is fully taxable at the federal and state level. And so that is not very well diversified as far as a tax asset. The ideal scenario is, you have a 401k, which is pre-tax, pay tax on every dollar. Ideally, you have after-tax accounts like an individual investment account or a joint investment account or a trust investment account. There's a lot more flexibility there, and they are much more favorable from a tax perspective than an IRA or a 401k. And then the third bucket that ideally you have, which is the best bucket to have, is a Roth IRA bucket. And now they do have Roth 401ks. You can choose to make Roth 401k elections as part of your employer plan. And there are also Roth IRAs. And Roths are, again, the best retirement vehicle that you can have, because all of that money grows tax-free for the rest of your life. You go at age 65, you retire. If you take money out of a Roth, it's fully tax-free. So $1 million Roth is $1 million in your pocket when you go to take it out, because $0 goes towards Uncle Sam and your local state government. So ideally, you have tax diversification. You have a mixture of those three accounts, so that when you go to retire and you need X dollars per month, you can choose each year based on your tax situation, whether you take it out of the Roth, the after-tax account, or the 401k. So that's number one. Number two is prioritizing those tax-preferred investment accounts if you're still in that phase where you're saving and contributing. So Roth IRA, we talked about. Health savings accounts are awesome vehicles with triple tax savings, and then 529s for the purpose of education planning. Number three is developing a tax efficient investment strategy. There's a lot more that goes into this, but it's very important to make sure, especially if you have individual, joint, or trust investment accounts, there's a lot of kind of hidden tax bills within there in certain investment strategies. So making sure that someone, whether it's us or another advisor, is looking through with that lens. And then lastly, within your lifetime tax burden, there's always this balance of weighing, do you want a current year tax saving strategy, or do you want to take into consideration a lifetime tax saving strategy? For example, a Roth IRA contribution versus a traditional IRA contribution. A Roth IRA, you pay tax on the amount that goes in, but it grows tax-free for life. So there's a little bit of pain in the current year for long-term gain versus a 401k or a traditional IRA contribution. You get the deduction in that year. So you get a short-term gain. You get the tax break in the current year, but you kind of have this bigger tax bomb waiting as that account continues to grow and you go and retire. And so we always try to kind of point out different strategies. And sometimes you need the current year tax deduction because your income bracket is higher than average years. And other times you'd rather take the tax hit in that current year because long term you want that tax-free asset at the end of the day. So it's not always a black and white picture. Oftentimes it's a mixture of both of those strategies depending on what your year looks like. Moving on to reducing your heirs tax burden. This one has become very simplified under Trump's tax law that he put into effect in 2016. And it's likely that it will continue if his second tax bill goes through this year. And the reason why is the current estate tax exemption is $13.99 million per person. So if you're a married couple, you have essentially $28 million. If your estate is less than $28 million, you don't have to worry about the estate tax. Essentially, your kids will get that full $28 million fully tax-free. If your estate is over that amount, then any amount over that is subject to estate tax, which are pretty significant tax rates. If the tax bill does not go through this year, then it would revert back to what it was pre-Trump's first presidency, which was about $5 million per person. That will impact a lot more people. It's about $10 million per household when you add in second properties, all of your investment accounts. It's going to be easier for more families to hit that limit. So obviously this is subject to change, but this 14 million a person has really, really limited who would actually have to pay that estate tax. The other piece in terms of reducing your heirs tax burden is you want to prioritize passing down those tax-free assets like a Roth IRA or an after-tax investment account, which, as you can see on here, is a brokerage account, a trust account, a joint investment account. The big reason there is those after-tax investment accounts. Let's say you had $100,000, you put it in a joint investment account, and over 30 years or whatever, it grew to $500,000. If you were to liquidate that whole account, you'd pay capital gains tax on the appreciation on that $400K. If you pass away and that $500,000 account goes to your son, his tax basis gets stepped all the way up to the date of death. So if he went and liquidated that full account the day after you passed away, his tax bill would be zero because his tax basis gets stepped up from what your basis was all the way up to the value of the account on the date of death. So these two account types, Roth IRAs and the after-tax investment accounts, are the best type of assets that your heirs can inherit. The reason why IRAs are lower on the list in terms of the best tax asset to inherit is because of RMDs. RMDs are required minimum distributions. You have to start taking money out of an IRA at age 73. That age is getting bumped up to age 75. But on the flip side, when you pass away with an IRA, that IRA goes on, let's say it's your kids in this case. Your kids will have to fully liquidate the IRA within 10 years of inheriting. And for a lot of people, let's hope everyone lives until their 80s at least. Your kids, when you're in your 80s, they're probably in their 50s and 60s. They're in their highest earning years. They're in high tax bracket years. So if they go and inherit an IRA, $1 million IRA, they have to take it all out in 10 years. You're adding almost $100,000 in taxable income to their income each year. And if they're in the top tax bracket, they're going to be paying 37%, and they're actually not going to receive nearly as much. And so that's why passing down those tax preferred assets is a huge benefit to your heirs and the ultimate tax bill that they will have to pay. All right, a lot of time on that, but that is a very important topic. Like I said, if you make poor investment decisions, there's no wealth to pass on to your kids. And, for most of our clients, they're in the pre-retirement phase or they're retired. And so we're not going for home runs at that phase in life. We're going for singles, we're going for doubles, we're going for more consistency over time. And I'm not talking to, your assets that are separately set aside just for your kids or your grandkids, because those specific accounts or assets you can afford to be a bit more aggressive with because it's likely no one's going to be touching those for a few decades. But when we're talking about your overall assets, like I said, we're looking for singles and doubles, and we want to avoid putting all of our eggs in one single basket. We want to avoid trading based on what we see in the news or trading based on a hot stock tip that your friend received, because day trading and trading on emotion can erode your returns very quickly. A couple of other key principles that you're likely already aware of, just making sure you have 3 to 6 months of expenses set aside, that's not invested in the market, that's in a money market fund, just in case one of your income stream falls off, one of you loses a job, something happens. Number two is diversifying out of concentrated positions. We have a lot of clients who have worked for large companies and have large positions in a single holding, which has definitely built wealth over time. But you just don't want to ride that front seat of the roller coaster as you get closer to retirement. So you want to slowly chip away at selling out of those concentrated positions. Number three is using those market downturns to our advantage. They're not completely wasted when the market goes down. Number two, we can harvest some of those losses to use in the future. And we can also rebalance your portfolio when the market's down. It's a great opportunity to do that, as well as the potential Roth conversion, taking money out of an IRA and putting it into a Roth when the market's down, and then letting it recover into a Roth. And then lastly, making sure we have the long-term lens on when it comes to investing. I think the last 3 months is a perfect example of this principle. The market has been extremely volatile in both directions, but that long-term lens helped us maybe not listen to the news quite as much. And here we are, 3 months later, the market is fully recovered from this year's downturn. So a couple key principles there. Third is around uncertain timelines. And if only we all knew exactly the day we were going to die, we'd be able to make every perfect decision about how we maximize our money. But unfortunately, we don't have that luxury. So we want to make sure we're covered for either scenario happening. So premature death, if you die sooner than expected, this really folds more into making sure you have proper life insurance coverage, especially if you're the primary earner or if you still have minor children. So we can definitely do a life insurance review to see what that gap in coverage would be. Making sure that you have up-to-date estate documents. The recommendation is updating them at least every 5 years, and definitely after you have a significant life event like a new child or someone passing away. We also like to make sure we're reviewing account beneficiaries at least once a year. Annuity contracts, pensions, investment assets, retirement accounts. You want to make sure those beneficiaries are what you want them to be and they're accurate. And then making sure that your spouse, your next of kin, knows where your assets are, what debt you have, where the documents are, where your passwords are. This is a super, super important piece. It just makes it easier on the surviving spouse or on the kids. And then there's outliving your money, which, like I mentioned earlier, is a huge risk that we want to make sure we plan for because people are living longer. They're living a lot longer than they were 50 years ago. And we want to make sure that that is covered and you're not running out of money when you're 92 years old and have to become the bag lady on the street at that age or having to go work at Walmart because Social Security isn't covering your bills. And the biggest risk that we see that we're really trying to have proactive conversations around is the cost of care. The cost of care is going nowhere but up. And especially as baby boomers start to need care, it is going to stress our healthcare system and costs are going to have to go up even more to cover the needs of that care. And so we definitely would love to have a conversation of, Are you self-insuring? Do you have the assets to self-insure? Do you need some sort of hybrid insurance product that has a death benefit? So if you don't use it, at least, your family will get a death benefit and it's not a use it or lose it. And beyond that, who's going to take care of you? Making sure you have those conversations with your spouse and with your family. The other key thing that's good to just kind of keep in mind with the longevity issue is making sure that you are reviewing your plan at least once a year. If you work with us, then you definitely are reviewing it once a year. Using conservative life expectancies, so using at least 90 to 94 years as a life expectancy. If you have history of living longer, then you want to use a higher life expectancy age. And then making sure that your expenses that you're modeling out, your expenses are going to go up 3% per year. Because if you say you need 100 grand right now to live off of in retirement, 15 years from now, 100 grand isn't going to go nearly as far and is not going to cover your costs. So you want to make sure your plan is modeling out that expenses are going to go up just to purely maintain your existing lifestyle and keep pace with inflation. On the long-term care topic, this is often an area that most of our clients are not as familiar with. And so we have a ton of resources. If you reach out to your advisor, if you reach out to Sherry or Teresa, we can send these resources to you on being a caregiver. I know the sandwich generation is dealing with this now. Just certain things to keep in mind. Finding the right care facility if you're helping a loved one, choose where to go and what's covered and what questions to ask, a nursing home checklist, helping relatives find the home care they need if they'd rather have someone come to their house every day. How do you even start that search? What does it cost? What criteria should you be looking for? And then lastly, what your survivors need to know. So this is really more of a checklist of all the things that you should have in a centralized place to make it much easier on your family if something were to happen to you. So please reach out. We're happy to share all of these resources to you guys. On that topic, again, not a one size fits all, but there are some baseline documents that we recommend that everyone has. Step one is to get the documents created if you haven't already and update them. Ideally every 5 years and definitely once there's a bigger life event. And then step two is to make sure your family, including your children, are aware of where the documents are and what your general wishes are. You don't have to go into this kid gets this amount, this kid gets that amount, this kid gets the car, this kid gets mom's jewelry, just kind of general wishes on, what your values are and what your wishes are for where your money goes. As far as basic estate documents, a will, everyone needs a will. Very, very important. It basically just spells out where you want your stuff to go when you're no longer there. The big thing about a will is it does not avoid probate. It does not bypass probate. So houses, cars, any kind of after-tax assets will still be subject to probate. If you're just banking on the will covering everything, those assets will still go through probate even if you have a will. The power of attorney is very important, making sure you have a medical POA and a financial POA in the event that you cannot make those decisions or are incapacitated, especially for us to send money out to a client from someone's account if they're incapacitated. If it's not their spouse, we have to have a financial POA on file to be able to send money out of that account, even if it's to pay for healthcare bills. A healthcare directive, just your wishes of if you are incapacitated or terminally ill. And then lastly, a trust. A trust is not for everyone. I just want to say off the bat. But there are very valid reasons for families to have trusts. Number one, to avoid probate if you don't want anything being contested. Number two is to create spending guardrails for your heirs, for your kids. You have a lot more control in a trust of who gets what and when. Or for reducing your estate if you are subject to that massive, $28 million estate limit. There are ways that you can do that. But definitely speak to your advisor if a trust is the right fit for you. All right, lastly, on soft strategies, this is just a little bit more background on some of the different areas. We all have kind of different beliefs in what's important to us. Many of you have created your own businesses. Many of you have built your own wealth. Some of you have inherited wealth or worked up the corporate ladder. And just wanting to make sure you instill some of those values into your kids. I have a lot of baby boomer clients that worked very hard their entire lives and have been very, very frugal and have a very hard time spending money in retirement. And so for us, our goal is to put a little bit more purpose to your money and making sure that your kids are aware of that purpose for the inheritance that they will ultimately receive. So just kind of thinking through what is most important to your family and what's important for you, for your kids to know those values that you want to pass through. So here's an example of a mindset. If you can't pay cash for something, don't buy it. Definitely I could see this with baby boomer generation with their parents, because their parents were being raised coming out of the Great Depression. And it created this feeling of they're scared of spending money unnecessarily. And that feeling leads to a behavior of being excessively frugal. Again, I see this all the time. On one hand, that's great because they avoid debt and they save a lot. On the other hand, it's not so great because you never are treating yourself. You're never actually using any of that wealth to enjoy your life, or potentially buying lower quality items and spending more money to replace those down the line. So this is an example of a money mindset that we all have that leads to a feeling and then an actual behavior, and some of the positive and negative implications of that. And so one thing that's really interesting, not that you need to have this discussion, but I think it's just an interesting reflection of, what certain money beliefs you might have inherited from your parents because of how they were raised or because of how, they were taught about money. Is it something that you then adopted and is now influencing your own relationship with money, or is it something that chose you to run in the opposite direction and do the exact opposite? And just kind of thinking through, are you passing down those same type of money beliefs down to your kids? And is that something you want to do, or is that something that you would like to kind of course correct? So food for thought on thinking through some of those different things. And then lastly, how do you structure an inheritance? This is also really important in terms of maybe things to avoid. If you already notice and you're worried that your kids might not be very good with money and maybe are a little bit of spenders, there are can do proactively to make sure that there are guardrails in place. You can stagger those distributions over time so they get, access to a certain amount of money at 30, at 40, at 50, considering what age you want them to inherit that money. Trying to promote certain habits of self-sufficiency, making it more on goals versus emotion-based needs. And just kind of being honest with any concerns that you have. And we can kind of help you think through some solutions of how we can create a plan that helps address some of those concerns. So ultimately, it comes down to how much money do you want your kids to actually receive, and when do you want them to receive it? And there are ways to kind of build guardrails to answer those two questions. So I know we're a little bit over time. We'd love to be a resource for you. This is very much a part of what we do every day, working with clients. And if we haven't necessarily dove into this as deeply with you, we would love to have this conversation. We do most of the heavy lifting, whether it's facilitating those money conversations, working with you as our primary client and starting to bring your kids in to help facilitate that first conversation. We've started to provide financial literacy to that next generation, to your kids or to your grandkids. We have a ton of material to kind of break down money concepts that are easier to understand. And then obviously a huge part of what we do is developing investment and tax strategies to help retain your wealth for your retirement, but then also passing along to your kids. And then lastly, we work with a lot of different attorneys throughout. Thank you guys for joining. Hope it was valuable, and we will touch base with you guys soon.